First, you're going to want to get your jack in place. We're just using the jack point recommended in the manual, probably under tire repair or wheel replacement. Get jacked up a little bit, then we're going to break free our lug nuts. It's a 21 millimeter, or you could use the what's it called? Or you could use the tire iron supplied with the car. That was loose. Jack it up to get the wheel off the ground. Also, by the way, it's good to make sure your e-brake's on if it works. And you're going to use a ratchet to remove your wheel the rest of the way. Just spin it. Forgot to mention it's good to put a jack stand under the side of the car before you start taking the wheel off. Two things you want to make sure you do before you get too far would be remove the brake line from the retainer and unplug the wheel speed sensor from right here. It's just a pinch and pull, and the brake line is held in by a retaining clip that you just pry out kind of like that. This comes down and out freely. And then the brake line is also clipped in up here. Or I'm sorry, the wheel speed sensor is also clipped in up here. Let's see if this comes out for a second time. Alright, next you're going to want to remove the top end of your sway bar end link right here. There's an inner hex head to the top bolt of this that is a 5 millimeter, and the outer nut is a 14 millimeter that you're going to have to use a wrench on, and you're going to have to insert 14 millimeter into the inside and twist the nut loose while holding this. You're going to have to give it a tap. At some point you can just start turning the inner bolt. That falls. Next you want to get this out. We do it by putting a pry bar on the end of the sway bar, pushing down to release it from the bind that it's naturally in. Get it out of the way. Next you're going to remove the nut down here that holds the bottom of the shock assembly, and it is a 17. Try not to hit your car too much. If it Looks nice. Once it's easy enough, you can switch to a ratchet. Get the rest of it out. If you don't have a pry bar, what I would usually use is a ratchet with a pipe on it. Give you some extra leverage. Pull the bolt, set it aside. Next, you're going to want to free the knuckle off of the bottom of the shock assembly. I've tried using a smaller hammer to get it off, pounding back and forth on the two sides, but that has yielded little results. I'd recommend using a larger hammer with a little bit of weight. I think this is a 4-pound hammer. Pretty much my favorite tool. And depending on how stuck on there it is, it might take a few minutes of whacking, but you'll get it eventually. This one was off a couple weeks ago, so it came off really easily.
Are you sure you just don't have massive biceps?
I mean, it's both, but it helps that it came off recently. Alright, just let that sit there. Make sure nothing's stuck, like your brake line. You don't want to mess that up. Next, you're going to want to pop the hood to expose the top 3 bolts of the shock assembly. Cleanliness is secondary to functionality. The top 3 bolts of the shock assembly are 13s on my car, but this shock has been replaced before, so your car might be different. Not positive about that. And once these 3 bolts are out, your shock is free to fall or do whatever it'll do. So I'll leave one in, and while I'm undoing the last one, I'll be ready to catch it. Someone overdid it on these bolts last time they were put in.
Wonder who would have done that.
I wouldn't have a clue. Now the reason this has been done before and that it's being done again is because last time I bought the cheapest ones I could find. Don't do that unless you absolutely have to. I kind of had to, so I have an excuse. I'm going to get this most of the way before I go down there to catch it. This might break. I'm gonna go big.
Go big or go home.
Yep. Get a little more power with just larger 1/2-inch ratchet. Okay, a little note, if they're as hard to get out as this, you may want to keep the second one started, just so the whole thing doesn't spin underneath. should not be this hard. Alright, that one's free. I know this one is almost out because I just put it back in, hold it underneath, and remove the last one. And then it's free. This is the new shock assembly, bought off of Amazon. I think it was in the 90s, $91 or something. This set's nice because it comes with not only new bolts, which I'll clearly need based on how messed up the old ones were coming out, and new washers, which I've not gotten before, and the bolt heads don't like to sit right because they don't have the right washers. Alright, next I like to get the new bolts and washers ready up here, so they're when you need them. I'm going to remove these different stickers and labels off of here. Thank you. Alright, next you're going to grab this guy. Make sure it's in the correct orientation with this slotted out part, which fits into the knuckle here, facing rearwards. You may actually have to, I take that back. You're going to have to turn this whole thing to make it line up with the bolt heads up there anyway. These bolts are not evenly spaced on here, the bolt holes. If you can see, on this one there's a rounded edge, and these two holes are farther apart than either of these sets. So this rounded edge with the farther apart holes, it needs to go towards the center, towards the inside of the car. Feed it up through. Get the bolts started. And your new shock is just hanging here. Looks like it's pretty close to being in the right orientation already. Next we're going to sort of just snug up these three bolts. The new ones also are 13s, so I guess that makes it kind of likely that the stock ones are 13s. We'll just snug them for now and torque them down when we're done. Alright, before we slide this new shock assembly into the knuckle, we're just going to run a little anti-seize around the bottom, because sometimes these have a pretty tight fit and will scratch up this paint and lead to rust, which will just seize the next one up all the more.
Just like that.
Just like that. So when you're sliding this on, this one lined up very well, but the alignment slot in the back needs to line up. Yep. And the way you do that, I wouldn't try messing with this because it's pretty rigid with all of your steering connected and everything. You can turn the entire shock little bits pretty easily, and then just keep working your way up until you're there. I think we're actually pretty close. I don't think we're quite there. You can use this bolt to be able to tell if you're there. If you're not there, this hole won't line up and the bolt won't thread in. Alright, looks like we're threaded in most of the way there. We'll tighten that up as before, like with the 17. snug it for now. So we ended up pulling these 3 bolts and the knuckle bolt and putting anti-seize on them because we forgot. So put anti-seize on the final one here and reinstall it. It's a bit much. You don't need much.
You don't use anti-seize, you get what we had when we were trying to remove it.
Yeah, a mixture of no anti-seize and over torquing them the last time. Next we're going to reinstall the sway bar end link. We're going to put some anti-seize on this as well. And we're going to try to reinstall it just like we took it out. Now if you don't have a pry bar or anything, you can also jack this up a little bit to get it to line up. Put this little bracket back on and get this nut started. Now you can tighten this nut up to a certain extent before the inner bolt starts spinning. Then you'll have to use the hex bit again to hold it steady. We're already spinning. Now when you're turning the inner bolt, you can note that it's leftwards turning to tighten it. Sometimes it's easier just to work the nut though. We'll get it snug for now. Alright, next we're going to torque everything down that we've installed, starting with the bolts at the top of the strut assembly. These I found were 23 to 28 foot-pounds. We're going to go in the middle to 25. Next we'll torque the knuckle bolt. I found that is 48 to 54 foot-pounds. We're going with 51. That was already close. Next we're going to tighten, torque down the sway bar end link nut. I found that it's 32 to 44 foot-pounds. I'm going with 36.
Other way.
Yes, it is. Thank you, sir. Left-hand turn for this. All right. All right, next you're going to reinstall your brake line just by sliding it in. Maybe. There we go. It was really close. Reinstall your C-clip. Just like that. Make sure you're snug. Plug in your wheel speed sensor once again.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah. If your brake light's on after you do this job, you probably forgot to plug this in. And make sure you clip this into its rightful place here. Otherwise it'll get cut in half by your wheel. And do one final check, make sure everything is in place, nothing's loose. And then you're done there. Finally, you're going to put your wheel back on. We're going to dab a little bit of anti-seize on all of the wheel studs before putting the wheel on so we don't dirty up the wheel. I'm wheeling that over here. That's what it looks like when you apply anti-seize after you put the wheel on. As always, tighten your lug nuts in a star pattern. Just get them snug until it's on the ground. We'll remove our jack stand. Lower the jack and let it on the ground. Then we'll give our lug nuts a final torque. It's good to check these once again after you drive it to make sure they're still torqued down. You may want to torque them to spec and retorque after a mile, but that's up to you.